Well, good evening, everyone. How is everyone doing out there? Hope everything is going well. Of course, let's do the customary check to make sure everything is working properly. And, probably don't want to have a reverb there. Let's see here. And, yep, everything's working there. And how's everyone doing in chat? No one's saying hello yet. Hello out there. And in the premium chat, let's see, in the YouTube chat, everyone is there. 11 people waiting. Hello. All right, and good evening. All right. See, I'm always paranoid about whether or not the video and the audio is starting properly or not. It's like, oh boy, is it working properly or what? What's going on? But because I'm not used to doing this, I'm still learning everything, especially live chat. But it's always fun to push this envelope, so to speak. So it is the week before the issuing of the winter forecast, and yes, French vanilla coffee again. I just had a sneezing fit right before I came online too, because I'm like sneezing. I think it was probably because of the hay, because we were feeding Norman, because that way Norman doesn't make a lot of noise, which he will anyway. Right? Right, Norman? Norman's happy. He's eating all his hay. He doesn't care. He's like, whatever, human. We have a lot to talk about, though. Look, we're a week out from the winter forecast. I know there's going to be questions. I will answer them without giving away too much. To be honest with you, this winter forecast is really, really tough to forecast. Yeah, weed pollen, too, is very high. But really, I don't really have much in the way of allergies. Susan does. Susan has allergies, but yeah, everything, everything. Hey, Norman, spring, fall, winter, not fun. But see, that's what I mean. The winter forecast is such that here's the question I'm wrestling with. How does the polar vortex evolution play out? Does the fact that it's weak now and being disrupted in the next couple of weeks lead to a rapid reversal or become strongly positive? And what were the conditions that caused that situation back in 2019, 2020? And will those conditions be repeated? So I'm doing a lot of studying, a lot of good research, going over some of the research, going over the equations, going over mass transfer between the ionosphere and the stratosphere, and stratosphere to troposphere, and try to find any hints in that respect. And also I'm trying to push the theory, well, not push, but test. That's the right word. Test the theory in trying to figure out where is mass building in the atmosphere, and how does that influence the circulations from 10 millibars all the way down to 1,000 millibars. And part of that is I'm studying the different precipitable water value transports in the atmosphere from the tropics to the polar regions, and where we've seen that happening more and more often. Some of the things that are pretty much the same as last year would be the state of the tropical forcing, which is La Nina. But even that is still okay. So you know what the tropical forcing is going to be, but how does that interact with the QBO evolution, and how much of that is showing up now? And that is where we start, because let me go to share screen here. We go to my favorite piece of data, which is the water vapor satellite picture. And this is the global view. I've been kind of sitting around staring at this global picture, because when you understand the physical equations involved, you kind of see the beauty and the evolution of the pattern setting in here. Now, first of all, some good news. The tropics is DEAD, 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 and I hope it stays that way. The GFS is suggesting something might pop up in about 10 to 12 days, but when I see this evolution take place with a ton of dry air in an area where climatologically this is where you favor a lot of your tropical development, this is great news. So that's part one. But part two that I'm noticing is a whole heck of a lot of upper level lows in this pattern. And it's interesting because typically in La Nina patterns, the polar jet stream is really, really amped up. Okay? The stronger the La Nina, the more amplified the polar jet stream is. Okay? So that's why when we talked about this last week, when you have a very strong La Nina, you end up with a mild weather pattern. Why? Because the polar jet stream is so strong, it's ripping across so fast that you can't create high latitude blocking. If you don't have high latitude blocking, you don't have a mechanism to take that Arctic air that's hanging out by the North Pole with Santa Claus down into our neck of the woods. So you need that high latitude blocking. It's basically a displacement feature. Okay, a good way to understand high latitude blocking is going to a stream, right, or a very small river, and take a large rock and observe the stream before you throw the rock in. How it's moving down the river, how it's influencing the banks, right? And then throw that large rock in. That's your blocking. And then notice how the water starts to diverge and change its motion. Okay? That's what high latitude blocking is. It's a influence of building up mass and creating a bounce in the atmosphere. So I'm looking at the water vapor satellite picture, and at times I'm just staring at it for 10, 15 minutes at a time. And you're seeing all these upper level low features. And you're seeing some characteristics of La Nina, like your southeast ridge, your weak subtropical jet stream, your amplified polar jet stream, but also a lot of these upper level lows and blocks. So I'm looking at the forecast here and notice something that's starting to show up towards the end of this month. And this all falls into MJO moving into phase 8 and 1. Is that you're getting these cold pockets starting to show up in the eastern United States and these blocks setting up. Now, I'm not sure whether this solution is viable in producing a major coastal storm for next weekend. Although the European ensembles, the GFS and the GFS ensembles, along with the Canadian guidance, have been hinting at some sort of low block setting up here. So I wouldn't rule it out. I just don't trust the details yet. But the theme behind this pattern is very interesting because it sets up a nice block, a nice upper level low here around the western Gulf of Alaska and portions of the Aleutian Islands. It supports a nice ridge over the Rockies and a very impressive trough with another sign of the polar jet stream kind of going into the split. Your subtropical jet stream is pretty weak. Show it up even better when you take a look at the winds. Take a look at these upper level winds. I always say, if you want to be really good in meteorology, you really have to understand your jet stream dynamics. And you have to understand the different streams that are involved here. So here's your subtropical jet stream. Here is your polar jet stream. Remember what I said, ripping across, very strong. You have a nice deep trough here, and then you get a split branch off of the polar jet stream. So you basically have 3 different jet stream regimes. So what does this all tell us? It tells me that I think that this pattern for this winter is going to be very stormy. I think you're going to see some typical La Nina characteristics, and I'll explain this more in the forecast when I issue it next week. But the key thing to remember in terms of cold air is transient. Okay, this cold air is not going to stick around, which is typical of La Nina years. If you want to see sustained cold, go to the northern plains. But we're going to be in the battleground. I'm very, very confident of that. The question is, what type of high latitude blocking am I going to be watching out for? So that's going to be something that I'm going to be detailing on and providing some data on and explaining why I'm going with what I'm going with when I get to the forecast. You thought I was going to give you the whole forecast tonight. No. I've been giving you hints of where I think this is going to go, but I still got to work out some factors in terms of how high latitude blocking develops, how long, and what type of interaction the polar jet stream, or should I say the polar vortex, will have on the forecast. One thing that definitely keeping an eye on is for this Friday, should I say a Saturday evening. Now, this cold front that's moving through is going to be pretty vigorous on Saturday night. Take a look. Very heavy rainfall is going to be marching through basically between 4 and 10 p.m. across the region. But one thing I'm going to be keeping an eye on is this jet streak at 850 millibars. Now you see here see how it gets sharp right here? I'm going to zoom in. You see this signature here? This typically means we're seeing an amplification of the heavy rainfall with this cold front. Now, some good news is that because it's been relatively dry the past 2 weeks or so, that the water table is starting to subside to something a little bit more normal. So just because we have heavy rain will not translate to flash flooding. But what I don't like seeing is that when you see this type of tight gradient showing up here as the cold front's moving through, this tells me the line's going to be intensifying to Saturday afternoon, Saturday into Saturday evening. So basically, as it's marching through New Jersey, the Hudson River Valley, New York City Metro, maybe even around the Philadelphia Metro too, this line is going to be strengthening to such a point that we're going to have to watch out for downburst wind gusts with some of these embedded thunderstorms. So right now, the SPC really doesn't have anything out in terms of any type of severe weather. But I would not be surprised if Saturday evening we're dealing with some severe thunderstorms. I like the idea of vertical wind shear. I certainly like speed shear. And that's where I think we're going to see that mixed down. Speed shear is where the jet stream, okay, let's say, here's your parcel at 850 millibars, okay? And this baby's moving along at a Corvette. So it's flying right at you. But at the lower levels, well, it's more like a Pinto, okay? It's moving along very slowly. So the difference between those wind vectors leads to a vertical circulation, shear. So you get this speed shear, and that vertical circulation leads to rising air and mixing and downburst wind gusts, and sometimes some mesolows. I don't think this is going to be a major severe weather impact, but don't be surprised Saturday evening we get some strong winds out of this. So I'm going to be keeping a very careful eye on that. I think the worst impacts are actually going to be over New England, where this jet stream is really going to be amplified very, very impressively. But don't let your guard down around the New York City Metro and Philadelphia Metro in this setup. And then after that storm leaves, now we move into our block. So let's look at the vertical wind shear. Now, vertical velocity. Now, I want to be very clear here. Vertical velocity is the rising vorticity from one level to another. So usually it's from, if you're looking at vertical velocity at 500 millibars, then you're looking at that velocity, vertical velocity cyclonic turning from the 850 millibar level to the 500 millibar level, which signifies rising air. When you have relative velocity, that is when it's on the same level. So think of it like a wave, right? So on the relative, it's a wave, and on the vertical, it's rising. So when this wave is coming along and is enhanced by the rising, it creates a lot of lifting in the atmosphere. So that brings us to our upper level low and our intensification for next weekend. And again, this is showing up on the European, and it's showing up on the GFS. Take a look at the GFS here during this time period. We won't do 18Z guidance because, as you know, I have a hate relationship with 18Z guidance. But you could see that the GFS is trying to hint at something forming here. The GFS does, well, what GFS does, which is basically try to merge everything into one huge upper level low. The GFS has always had this problem with its equations dealing with the balance of mass in the atmosphere. And that leads to these, what I used to call, bless you, what I used to call Murphicanes, okay, when it was called the MRF, okay. Murphicanes is when the model tries to phase every shortwave in North America into one huge vortex, which never really happens because then you would violate the conservation of mass and energy. But it tries to do it anyway. But you can see the overall hint here that the GFS is trying to play. So you're seeing this evolution take shape on a variety of models and hinting at the potential for a nice little coastal low setting up for next weekend. Just in time for us to start our little vacation for our anniversary, wedding anniversary. So we got a nice storm to kick that off.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, tell me about it. But yeah, I mean, the GFS and the European, they're not too far off, but notice the European doesn't try to phase every shortwave on existence in North America into one huge upper level low. It keeps everything kind of separate. So that's pretty much my thoughts for this evening. I am going to answer your questions while drinking some coffee. There you go. This is some pretty good coffee too. I need all the caffeine. Let's see if there's anything. All right, good. Everything's working out well on YouTube. Now let me answer some of your questions, and we'll rock this out. So again, good evening, everyone. Any similar situations to the prior year in terms of the winter forecast? I think that the La Nina from last year is going to have some similar themes to this year. I like the QBO is going to be more of a factor this year than last year. I don't think that the forcing mechanisms of the atmosphere are the same as what we saw in 2019, 2020, especially in terms of how it's going to be influencing the polar vortex. The snow ratio in Siberia is pretty close to being the same. That's where I'll go from there. Is the strength of the tropical jet surprising to you right now? And is it due to the MJO phase or is something else going on? Tropical jet's pretty much being enhanced by the MJO wave. I'm not going to say I'm surprised. Let me just, because of this nature of the MJO right now, I would say if we are in phase 8 and 1 and 2 later on towards late October, and the subtropical jet stream is still strong enough to produce this strong shear over the Atlantic, then that would be surprising. But I don't think that. And I think that's why some of the model guys are trying to pop a tropical cyclone towards the end of this month somewhere around the Caribbean, which would make sense. The upper level lows also show up on the 500 millibar and 250 millibar wind flows on Earth New School, really amplified polar jet stream. Yes, definitely. Here's the thing. I think that this year is going to be unique in the theme of dealing with upper level lows in this pattern through the cold season. And I'm very concerned about the forecasting prospect of having to deal with a marginal cold air mass being enhanced because of crashing 500 millibar heights. And how do you forecast for that properly? I think that's going to be a huge challenge this year. And it's going to be a very difficult forecast because what you're going to try to figure out is how rapidly does the boundary layer cool, that's your surface, in relationship to freezing rain, sleet, and snow accumulation. And there are going to be some forecasts where you nail it, and there are other forecasts where it's snowing but nothing's accumulating. And temperatures are 33.5 degrees. And there's nothing you could do. And then there's other times where it gets down to 31.9 and you got a foot of snow on the ground that you weren't expecting. I think it's going to be one of those. I think that's going to be a problem this year. I really do, based on what I'm seeing. And it's going to be something that's going to challenge a lot of meteorologists, myself included. So I've been studying up a lot on the nature of how to forecast with crashing 500 millibar heights in developing upper level lows. Let's see here. So the winter forecast is going to have a lengthy how this can go wrong section. Yeah, I usually one of the things I don't get with a lot of these winter forecasts that are out there in the public is that they never explain like, hey, what can go wrong? And so you get a lot of this, I guess you can call it misunderstanding that that this part of meteorology is without a lot of uncertainty. Seasonal forecasting is sometimes like throwing darts at a board, because what you're trying to do is figure out how synoptic beta and synoptic features, which is kind of like tropical forcing, which is actually more mesoscale, could influence the amount of convection that forms around the date line, which influences the jet stream around the Aleutian Islands, which enhances the upper level low, which enhances a ridge over the western United States, and then leads to a storm over the eastern United States. And you have to be correct about the development of that convection or thunderstorms. So you're essentially trying to forecast for the development and placement of thunderstorms 3 months out. That's what you're asking for. That's what you're trying to do. And how does that interact with every other feature in the atmosphere, including stratospheric environment, where you're trying to figure out what is the transport via the QBO, which is the winds in the stratosphere around the tropics. How does that influence and disrupt the polar vortex? And that's connected to convection, and convection is driven by mesoscale properties, and mesoscale properties are influenced by something as small as an outflow boundary. 3 months out. So yeah. You're going to be just fine forecasting that completely accurately. It's a difficult forecast, but if you do it right, you can learn a lot. Not saying you're going to be right, but you'll learn a lot. And you'll be able to adjust the forecast as you go along. The important thing, though, is to make sure you don't put out a false sense of security here. When people say, oh, yeah, it's definitely going to be this, and you don't discuss what can go wrong, really you're doing disservice to your client, whether that's the general public or or a snow removal company, because you're not giving them the heads up that, hey, this is what could happen if things go wrong, and this is what we're going to be looking for and when. That's how you prepare a client properly. You don't just say, oh, we're going to be right all the time. No one is right all the time. But yeah, there's definitely going to be a nice lengthy section on how can this all go wrong. Of course, last year I did put in super volcano and aliens attacking, so that could go wrong too.
Can't rule it out this year either.
No, not this year. No, not at all. Every time I do the winter forecast, I got this image in my head of that Super Bowl commercial with the devil in 2020 dating. I think they might be dating 2021 too. Any flash flooding concerns with the cold front passage? I would watch out for urban flooding, especially if you have some clogged drains still. But I think that our ward table is starting to stabilize, so I'm not really worried about that too much. Do you expect a lot of wind shear? Yes. Yes, with the cold front, definitely. I'm very careful. I'm very worried about speed shear. Excuse me. And thunderstorms capable of producing that vertical wind shear issue. And so with that, there will be a threat for an isolated severe thunderstorm on Saturday night. So that means that when I'm typing my winter forecast up, I'm going to be saving every 5 seconds. Let's see. Matthew Myers asks, I saw a forecast today that said mild air will come back in late October and early November due to a strong monsoon flow in the southwest, which is pushing systems further north in the upper plains, which allows warm air to flow higher north, then drift east towards us with each system. Curious of your thoughts. Air mass evolution really doesn't work that way, to be honest with you. I mean, okay, you have the remnants of that hurricane in the Pacific, but it really didn't amount to as intense as it was forecasted to be. So you certainly have that tropical moisture there, which would be a factor, but that's really being drawn into the cold front. Here, hold it. Let me pull up the water vapor satellite picture so we can take a look for ourselves. Okay, so you have what's left of that tropical system. That's getting drawn up into Texas. That's not really an issue. The monsoon over the desert southwest really would not be an overwhelming factor for the pattern evolution. With that being said, if I'm looking for triggers in the pattern, what I look for is the Pacific, not what's going on in the desert southwest. So I don't like that idea. I can certainly see a modified Pacific air mass coming across the Rockies and into the eastern United States eventually in early November. But I don't know. I like the idea around Halloween. I basically around starting next weekend into November 5th or so, where we have a nice deep trough over the eastern United States and more of an influence of polar air masses rather than Pacific air masses. I also like the idea, though, of a moderating trend towards the middle of November, but not significantly above normal. Let's see here. The European ensembles has a 960 millibar low on the 24th. Hey, let's pull that up. Hopefully it comes up. Let's take a look. Let's see here. Let's see what does the ensemble show here. Okay, there's our strong cold front. That's well supported. It's quiet for much of next week, and then tell you what, I got an idea. Let me go to control here. There it is. Yeah, it bombs it out. Okay, so what is this telling us? Well, when you have this type of rapid intensification of a low pressure system, and usually what happens is that you're seeing a rapid crash in the 500 millibar heights in this type of setup here. So now we're seeing this in European ensembles, GFS ensembles, Canadian guidance. So clearly there's a strong signal here of some sort of development. Meanwhile, during that same time period, or at least approaching in that time period, you have the MJO. In fact, let me zoom in on here. The MJO in that time period starting to shift towards a phase 1, 8-1, somewhere around there. Let's see here. So there's the latest, right around that time period when we see that storm develop. So there's certainly some sort of enhancement and lifting here going on. There's signals all around. So something is definitely going to be popping next weekend. Great. Rob is asking, you may not want to answer this, and I totally understand, maybe. But when I think of upper level lows and high latitude blocking, I think of major bombogenesis potential on the East Coast. Would you say Miller B are a high threat this year? Typically in La Nina patterns, a Miller B is more likely than a Miller A. I will say that. In this type of regime, I'm going to be very careful when I say this. You need everything to fall together just right to support a major storm, a bomb, so to speak. I like the idea more of a lot of pesky systems adding up to a lot of pesky problems. Let's see. And then, of course, there's the potential for solar surprises. Quieter, more active, CME, direct hits. Yep, the sun remains pretty active, though. I'm not seeing right now of anything that's going to disrupt the polar vortex from the solar aspect, but obviously you can't rule it out. How does the Pacific look tropical-wise, particularly the Western Pacific? Well, let's pull up some data here. See if there's any current storms popping up anywhere. We know about Pamela in Mexico. Let's see here. We had one tropical system that went into the Koreas. We have a nice, impressive storm. That's not getting anywhere near the Northern Pacific. So, and pretty much a lot of your activity is right around the Indian Ocean right now. But since I have time, I wanted to bring up La Nina real fast. The latest temperatures, and let me pull up 3.4, we're down to minus 0.6. Again, we're getting to the time of year where La Nina starts to maximize. So I'm not looking for like a Nino 4, which is towards the date line. You're at minus 0.5 Celsius. 3.4 we already did. That's minus 0.66. Nino 3 is at minus 0.8. And Nino 1 plus 2 minus 9. What does that stand for? Well, that means your strongest anomalies are showing up in your eastern zones. Remember what I've been saying to premium members, you know that I've been talking about for weeks that based on where the subsurface anomalies are, that we're going to see the sea surface temperatures crash in the eastern zones eventually. And now we're starting to see that very clearly. And that's going to start to lock in. And that is where I think we're going to see our east-based weak La Nina. I don't think it's going to be strong. I think some of the model guys suggesting that is off its rocker. And the reason why is that there's no indication of anything like that in the SOI. For those of you who are new to following, especially public, the SOI is basically your atmospheric reflection or influence or register of how much La Nina is influencing. A strong La Nina gets you up here. A weak La Nina is basically around 10 in the SOI values. Moderate's around 20. Strong is 30 and higher. In this case, I am not seeing any type of jump towards a moderate or a strong La Nina influence. And this is what matters, guys, because this is the actual atmospheric response. This is what I go by when I'm forecasting. And look, sea surface temperatures are nice, and don't get me wrong, they're important. But they don't mean a hell of beans if they don't reflect what's going on in the atmosphere, which is what you're forecasting for. So I like to use the SOI. And pretty interesting data. Let's see here. When do you expect to have a better read on the positioning intensity of upcoming high latitude blocking? My suggestion when it comes to high latitude blocking is take a week at a time. And the reason why I say that is that, especially in this pattern, I'm getting a lot of signals that if they work together just right, could lock in a sustained negative EPO, AO, and NAO pattern, which is basically, the holy grail for snow lovers, okay? But it's not 100% that could be sustained. And the reason why I say that is because I'm seeing some signals, and one concern I have is that the polar vortex goes through I guess you could call it almost like a surprise strengthening, or basically strengthening at the wrong time. Now, a positive is that typically when you have a warm fall, which is what this has been so far, it supports a great potential for a colder weather pattern in the winter. Typically, if you have a cold fall, below normal fall, it usually leads to a mild winter. And the reason why is because of the transport of heat and cold air and the process that you need in order to have a cold or cool fall, which typically means that you have a lot of your below normal heights in the mid latitudes and above normal heights in the higher latitudes, which means you're not getting any snow growth around Siberia, which means you're not getting anything to disrupt the polar vortex, which means the polar vortex locks up all the cold air in Canada in the winter. When the opposite happens, where you have a warm mid-latitude regime and a cold high-latitude regime in the fall, the observations flip as you get to the winter. Now, that doesn't always mean you get snow in your backyard. That cold air could be funneled towards, let's say, the Rockies, but it leads to a higher potential of below normal temperatures in the mid-latitudes where we live rather than not. Some real noticeable pools of warm and cold water in the Pacific, especially northern Pacific. Let's take a look at that again. Excuse me. Okay, so what do we have here? Interesting. Well, first we start off in the Pacific. Hello, negative PDO. This is a textbook signal. Let's see this. Let's zoom in. This is a beauty right here. This right here is a very strong signal. And it's a signal that, unfortunately, if you have any friends or family in the Rockies, California, Desert Southwest, This is a drought signal. I have been telling people for about 4 or 5 years now, regardless of climate change, okay, um, this is a very, very, very dangerous signal. It's a climate signal that we have been studying about and known about since the 1970s. And when you get a sustained negative PDO signal, it produces a ridge over the Rockies and also a displaced ridge around the Bahamas, kind of like a La Nina, displaced east base La Nina. And it sets up a drought scenario here. So, like all those golf courses in California that they built, yeah, they're in trouble, along with everyone else in the Golden State. And same thing around basically the Southern Rockies. This is not a good signal for those people, unfortunately. Now, it does also mean it's a stormy signal for the Pacific Northwest, and also it's a signal that, if you couple it with an east-based La Nina, tends to support your sustained cold air over the northern plains and Great Lakes. So, little preview for you guys around the Great Lakes. Get your snow shovels ready. You're going to need them. So that's very interesting. That signal is showing up very nicely. If we get any type of tropical development in the Pacific, watch out for something to try to turn up towards the Aleutians. Certainly potential here in the Sea of Japan. Holy smokes, it's bath temperature type water over here. So you get a tropical system pop up from here, it's really going to blow up and head up towards Kamchatka. So definitely watch out for that. Meanwhile, it's the time of year where we start to keep an eye out on the sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic Ocean and notice the above normal temperatures around the Gulf of Mexico and the eastern United States. Now, I'll go into this more next week, but basically think of it this way. Warm water leads to warmer air. Warmer air likes to rise. You have to have a balance in the atmosphere. So what dives in from the continent in order to match the rising warm air? Cold air. Just think about it. Yeah, I know. I don't know why. Every time around this time, you know what it is? I think it is. This is my brain telling me, hey, it's almost 9 o'clock. We should be in bed because I get up at 4 a.m. Well, actually, I get up at 3 a.m. So, at this point, I'm kind of like, I'm tired. My brain's like, I'm tired. I'm like, shut up, drink more coffee. So, let's see here. The 10 millibar polar vortex looks rather strong on New School. Yeah, that could be a little bit misleading. With a semicircle of really strong winds on one side, it looks like there is a big mid-latitude feed being sucked right up on the eastern side. I'd be very careful using New School with measuring the polar vortex because of the scale of it. It is strengthening. Let me pull that up real fast. So let's see. Do we have 18Z of this? That's what I thought. Okay, so at 10 millibars, we definitely have a strengthening polar vortex, which is what you would expect for this time of year at 10 millibars. But notice how it gets displaced as we go on through the next 10 days. And look at this. Okay. Even on the GFS ensembles, it's showing the same displacement. So what's going on here? Well, let's see. Let's pull up the 50 millibar temperatures. And we could see some pretty significant warming. Now, this warming is taking place in the northern Pacific. If you want to see a disruption in the atmosphere of the polar vortex, you want to see your warm air come in from the northern Pacific through Alaska. That usually leads to a displacement of the polar vortex that supports the sustained trough over the eastern United States. So we're starting to see that already. Now again, the wild card is that if you weaken the polar vortex too fast in the late fall, it naturally rebounds, and so your strongest polar vortex occurs in January, which is when you're supposed to have your coldest and stormiest weather, but instead you get nothing. You get a mild winter for a good portion of the middle of the winter, which is what happened in 2019-2020. And we were able to pick that out by the time we got to around Christmas time, much to the depression of many. But I don't think we're going to see that this year. I'll explain why in the discussion coming up next week. Okay, so the question is, I got a question on YouTube about the potential for nor'easters. Nor'easters, I like the forecast for nor'easters more in weak El Nino years than weak La Nina years. That doesn't say that you can't have a nor'easter in a La Nina year. It's just more difficult to pull off. I do like during weak El Nino years, because the subtropical jet stream is stronger, but it's not overwhelming. It leads to a higher potential for phasing, which leads to a higher potential for nor'easters to develop. That is true, Card. 2019 had a very unique feature here, and one of the factors that went into that happens to be the interaction with the ionosphere and also the QBO, which is still a bit of a wild card. But I don't think we're going to be dealing with the same conditions. We certainly don't have the same solar conditions. We got 10 minutes to go, and then I am going to hit the bed. Oh, by the way, what do you guys think of the new logo, by the way? Let's see here. Yep. The new logo is out. I hope you guys enjoy it. It's so far a pretty good response. We are developing stuff, mugs and stuff like that. It's in the works. We are working on developing the best quality. Excuse me, the best quality before just throwing it out there. So it's going to take us a little bit of time, but it's well worth it. But we're going to have all sorts of stuff: shirts, mugs, dogs.
I will say this.
Yes.
Anything that anyone specifically?
Yeah. Is there anything that anyone specifically would like to see? And this is for YouTube as well. If you guys want to drop a suggestion about what you'd like to see in terms of merchandise, that's what I want to use. Merchandise. If there's anything that you particularly would like to see, let us know. Drop a line, and we'll go with that. Let's see here. Cardex, is that a concern that the jet stream will be so amped and so active that it never phases and basically shortwaves never hook up? Typically, I get concerned with that when you get to moderate to strong La Ninas. I don't think that's going to be an issue this year, but I can't 100% rule it out. I think we'll see that at times because you don't get a winter storm every week. That's like freakish. That's 95, 96 type territory, which you never like to forecast for. You just, if you fall into that type pattern, you just let it ride, you know. Let's see here. Looks great. I would add something to note that the name of the site someplace so people can really see what the logo is for. Yeah, the way that the social media landscape is, it only really allows for the logo itself, but I also have the name plastered all over the place. It also helps that I've been in business for like 10 years, so people kind of get an idea. Um, but the thing I really like about it is that it's being unique as a stationary front. Who really has a stationary front as a logo for a weather company? No one. I checked. So there we go. Definitely the looks like the coffee mugs are definitely a big ask. So we'll definitely go look for that. See if there's anything on YouTube. Not yet. That's okay. But good. I'm glad that the logo went over well. Let's see. Since we got a little bit of time, I'm going to pull up the NAM guidance, see if that's new. And see if we have any update on our cold front. It's still a little bit too far out. Let's see here. I think the European 18Z should be out. One thing I'm looking forward to is when we fix the clocks, because I'd like to have my model data out a little earlier. Let's see here. The new European continues on with the same idea of the cold front marching through from about 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., producing some pretty nasty weather around 7, 8 p.m. So definitely want to be in for that. What is the football forecast for the weekend? I gotta be honest, I didn't get a chance to take a look at it, but might as well do it right now. Let's see here. So there's the Sunday thing. And let me pull up the, let's see here. Let's see what stands out here. Let's see. So we got Philadelphia is on Thursday. That's going to be fine. Jacksonville. Well, let's just see the overall weather pattern. Let's see. We got some strong winds around Buffalo. The rest of the United States is pretty quiet. So let's see. Where is Buffalo playing? Let's see here. Buffalo's at Tennessee, so that would have been one impact, but that's not going to be that big of a deal. Dallas at New England. That. Okay. Dallas at New England, Sunday afternoon. Watch out for that game for weather impacts in terms of strong northwesterly winds into the stadium. It's probably going to cut down the throwing game. It could be another wild game when it comes to field goals. Rest of the games, really, I don't see any type of major impacts. I mean, you got the Giants, but Giants have bigger problems than the weather, so I don't see that being a big determining factor in terms of the game. Let's see here. Chicago could be breezy, but I think they'll be manageable. Kansas City at Washington, I think it should be pretty tranquil for that one. Carolina should be fine. Baltimore should be fine, although a bit breezy. Let's see here. Cleveland. Yeah, I mean, I think the big standout one's going to be Dallas at New England. All right, because during that time period, you have, I'm not so much worried about rainfall, but definitely those strong winds. In terms of my picks, which I'm starting to rebound, I'm back over 500. I had a really bad start to the year in terms of my picks. I got Philadelphia beating Tampa Bay. Now you might be wondering, why would Philadelphia beat Tampa Bay? Because I think that the Philadelphia game for Tampa Bay is the type of game where you kind of look past your opponent and you tend to underestimate them. I think Philadelphia could shock Tampa Bay. I would not be surprised by that. And as far as the Chiefs, I think they're bound to start going on a winning streak. Either that or I'm going to be incredibly depressed because I can't have the Mets and the Chiefs have bad seasons. I can't have that. It has to Has to balance out for me. But see, the thing is that the Chiefs have a defense. It's just that they appear to have forgotten how to play defense. If they just play league average, we'll be back to where we should be. So I'm pretty confident of that. All right. So we are getting pretty close to ending this up. If anyone has any more questions, if not, I will wrap it up and get ready to relax. We'll watch CSI tonight, or Susan will watch CSI, and I'll try to keep myself awake. Or we'll watch it tomorrow. I love watching CSI. It's just that at some point, my mind's like, nope, shut off, get down. So it looks like, all right, so that's going to be it for tonight. Thank you again for joining. I really appreciate it. We will continue to work on the merchandising and all that stuff. But I think
working on it, I promise.
Yeah, we're gonna get it out. It's gonna be well worth it. Perfect timing. Looks like a lot of snow in Western Canada coming up. Yes, indeed. Also, watch out for a massive expansion in Siberia next week as well. So yeah, that's it for tonight. You guys have a wonderful night. Thank you for joining. And as always, stay safe out there.